Senegal's presidential candidates ended their final pitches to voters yesterday at midnight ahead of an unprecedented election tomorrow. About 7 million people are eligible to vote. Despite the last-minute withdrawal of 2 candidates, 17 contenders remain in the race. President Macky Sall has been in power since 2012, is not seeking a third term. For more on this discussion, we are now joined by political scientist Dr. David Matsanga, all the way from Accra in Ghana. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Now, Senegal is one of the most stable democracies in the West African region. What would you say are the main issues and concerns that have shaped this electoral campaign in Senegal?
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here and for inviting to give my analysis of the Senegal's elections that take place tomorrow in the morning by 5 GMT. But let me start by saying we started on a wrong footing. The president of Senegal, Macky Sall, wanted to change the constitution so that he has a third term. Political opponents have been denied or have been refused to take part in these presidential elections. Some were in prison. So we have already started on a wrong footing. Whatever you want to analyze here, we are analyzing from a point of almost on a cliffhanger politics, where we can see we don't know what will happen, whether people will accept the results or they will not accept the results. The prospect of real turmoil could come after the results have been declared, and the opposition could go back to the streets to say Mr. Macky Sall tried to rig the elections. So that is where we are beginning from first.
So with that in mind, Doctor, we know that many of these opposition leaders are either sitting in jail or unable to contest these elections. How would you then assess the current popularity and public sentiment towards the incumbent party, especially with the work that former president, or rather current president Macky Sall, also not standing for re-election for the third time?
This was one of the best democracies in West Africa and ECOWAS, one of the beacon of hope for democracy in Africa, the growing democracy in Africa. I looked at it, President Macky Sall as one of the Democrats. Whenever I used to meet him in the African Union headquarters, we greet and have tea and coffee at the cafeteria. But look at this. He has spoiled his legacy by trying to change the constitution, by detaining opposition leaders. Whether he puts which candidate, there is a perception already laid down that he wanted to rig these elections. So the 62-year-old former prime minister, who is now being fronted as a frontline, actually one of the candidates that the ruling party wants to put forward, might face a lot of time and might face a backlash from voters. Remember, the opposition leaders have just been brought out of jail 1 week ago. The most popular one has been told, you can't be part and parcel of elections in Senegal. And this man has now fronted his own other friend, who was also in jail. So Africa, we have a problem. And I've said it, and I will continue to say, and I want to thank you people, the people of South Africa, for holding elections and going home without throwing stones. You have a very good culture of holding elections peacefully, waiting for the results from your offices. Here in Africa, out of these 20 countries that are holding elections in Africa this year, I expect only 4 that will bring out good results. The rest, we have a problem.
So, Dr. Matsanga, I mean, from what you outline with President Macky Sall being the beacon of hope when it comes to some of the strongest and stable democracies, what would you say then changed? Why do you think he has taken the approach that he has taken that has now led the people of Senegal to where they are today?
Greed. Some people, you remember Macky Sall was at the center of even flying to Ukraine as the AU chairperson, wanting to arm twist whatever was taking place in Ukraine. Corruption has taken place, has eaten Senegal. Senegal used to be one of the countries where you don't practice corruption, you are taken in jail. Corruption. Most of these leaders in Africa fear to relinquish power because of the number of crimes that have been committed. And we must develop a culture where we must forgive. Because I think African Union should do a charter where that every African head of state who leaves power, leave him to go and rest on his farm. We might not have people extending their constitutions. This guy was doing very well. He saw that his term was ending, and the people coming were saying, this is what you have done wrong, this is where you have taken money, this is where you are taking Senegal. And imagine the whole area of West Africa. Senegal had the best army, one of the best armies that could intervene in ECOWAS situations. But it just went down, started witch hunting the opponents, destroying the opposition. And two, another thing that we must appreciate as Africans, apart from South Africans who know what it means by democracy, the rest of the Senegal had known what democracy was since 1960. This man spoiled the sweetness of democracy in Senegal by trying to make sure that Senegal goes into a turmoil. This is not going to work. Africa must learn that holding too many elections does not mean you are fostering democracy. Let's learn about democracy. Let's go back and see what we have done wrong in 67 years since Ghana got independence. Have we improved in our democratic culture? Are we tolerant to each other? How many African leaders write speeches for conceding? I have looked at almost of the African leaders except in South Africa and Tanzania and now Liberia and Ghana. I have not found any African leader who has two speeches in his court. They write one speech. Neither have I found opposition leaders in Africa who have two speeches. Most of the opposition leaders in Africa come with one speech: I'm winning the election. So until we go back and see the culture of democracy, right, internal democracy in parties and external democracy within the countries, Africa will still have a long way to go to be very democratic and all states to be democratic.
So, Doctor, these particular elections, coming back to Senegal, I mean, they were postponed. They were meant to happen early in the year, and then now they've been brought back. I mean, they were postponed, and now we're having the elections tomorrow. What would you say some Senegalese people will be heading out to the polls tomorrow?
I think with the hatred that people have for Macky Sall, people will head to the polls. The reports coming from there, because I have my correspondents on the ground who are giving me, my political analysts on the ground, giving me information from where I am now. The situation is most people will wake up to go and vote to punish, but they are not very sure of how the vote will be guarded, because there is quite a lot. Why Macky Sall wanted to push these elections for a further date was his party was not prepared. Therefore, if they come back, the people are fed up. If there is voter turn-up, if there is no voter apathy, if there is no intimidation, harassment, then people will turn up. And above all, I want to tell you, there is a serious heat on the West African coast, because the Sahara is almost burning and everybody is almost taking, even if you sit out. I don't know whether that heat also as a factor could, prevent people from coming out to vote. All in all, it has been peaceful. There has not been any other, since the campaign was declared, we haven't seen many people being killed or beaten up or harassed. Let's wait and see what takes back tomorrow, and we come back maybe on Monday or another day to see. And another point before I leave, most of the African countries take this note, especially Senegal, is this rule of 50+1 and the rule of Supreme Court. African countries must start studying this 50+1. You go under elections, international suffrage. world suffrage of electoral system. You elect people, 19 million of you go, 7 million of you go to elect a president. Then there is this rule of 50+1. Why don't we develop a model of South Africa? You have no problem. Even if you can go back and sit in your house, wait for the election to be announced, the winner to be announced, to go and form a government. But this 50+1 is where most African countries have found a problem, where violence has been triggered from. Because the electoral chairman go back and sit in the boardroom and choose who is the tallest, who is the shortest, who got more, who has a bigger pocket, who can pay us. So African countries, to avoid coups, to avoid chaos on the streets after elections, remove the American type of constitutionalism of 50+1 and the Supreme Court, 7 judges sitting down to decide a fate for 94 million Nigerians. Look at that. How 7 judges put in a house, they decide the fate of people who have woken up at 4 a.m. to go and vote. I think Africa needs to review its own electoral laws in order to find peace. Otherwise, we shall be losing a human being every time the elections date is set, during elections and after elections.
All right, Dr. Matsanga, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having your insights on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. That was political scientist Dr. David Matsanga.